on this. So anyway, here we go. Thank you so much for coming out. And now we're going to be starting into the actual meat and potatoes of what we're going to be talking about tonight. And so here's a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about a strategic approach to successfully setting you up as an investor in today's market. And quite frankly, that's a great thing to do. We are going to put everybody on mute for the time being, just so that we can be respectful of time. We do have openings at the end for some Q&A. So we would love to have a Q&A if you'd like to at the end. Tonight's strategic approach is to help you successfully set up for investing in your own home. And we're going to go through three main models that you really do need to consider as you're looking to buy an investment home. And this is extremely important when you're talking about these, because if you don't set yourself up correctly with each one of these models, it could be that you end up setting yourself up for a position to where you may not necessarily have the outcome that you're looking to have with real estate. You kind of have to think of real estate as part of your portfolio. And so what I mean by that with your portfolio is that you need a way of diversifying. Most people can think very commonly of stocks and 401ks and annuities when it comes to investing, but they forget very much about, that real estate is actually a great component. So while you have appreciation and dividends that actually happen with stocks and with 401ks, there are other forms of investments out there too. Real estate does have dividends. It's called cash flow on your property. And then it also has appreciation, no different than stocks. I mean, I wish I would have bought Google back when it was first released. I'm sure you do too. But there are other forms of diversifying your investment portfolio as well. One of the craziest versions, and this is a very real story, one of the craziest versions is somebody that I ran into who was investing in silver. And now when he told me that, I was thinking the little silver ingots, whatever like that, that's how he was investing. But no, he wasn't doing it that way. He was going around to all the thrift stores. He had his phone on speed dial at the thrift stores. And every time a silver spoon or a silver plate or anything silver would show up, they'd give him a call and he would actually come and buy all of the silver. And he had it in a warehouse. And he shared with me that the silver that he had was about waist high, and it filled a room of a 24 by 24 building. So you can imagine how much what this guy has tied up in silver right there. I can't even imagine the amount of money that he has tied into it. But the whole point of what I'm trying to say is that diversifying your portfolio is actually pretty important, because with real estate, you can really build wealth with it, because not only are you going to be getting what would be commonly thought of as dividends with cash flow, but you're also going to be getting appreciation. Over time, this home is going to increase, no different than Google stock did as when you first bought it. But there's also a third benefit that most people don't consider when they're doing this, which is the taxable benefit. You see, in this taxable benefit, what we end up with is that you can also take a depreciation against your income taxes. That way, your model is actually pretty sweet when it's all said and done, and you're building wealth in a very rapid pace. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the client model. And in the client model, it's extremely important that you identify what property you want by visualizing which client it is that you're willing to work with. Because let's kind of put it into perspective. Each client carries their own set of risks with them. And you need to understand a strategy to give you peace of mind, help you build wealth, but also at the same point in time, have a calculated view of risk so that you're not setting yourself up. Now, there is no risk-free strategy, whether it's in stocks, whether it's in buying spoons, whether it's in buying whatever it is that you're buying to invest in. There is no risk-free strategy. But there is a way that you can make a calculated decision in order to be able to make the most out of it. So some properties that you're going to be dealing with, there is a direct proportion between cash flow and appreciation. And you really need to identify the client model that you're looking to be able to do this with, so that you can identify which way you want to go. And I know everybody wants a little bit of both, but some people want everything to be 100% appreciation and 100% cash flow. And that just simply isn't going to be possible in every single situation. And so, for example, when I say setting a strategy, what you need to think about is how long do you have with this timeline that you can either focus on appreciation or focus on cash flow. So if you have a client or you're a client that is actually going to be moving into your retirement years, you may not necessarily have the necessary time to wait for the home to appreciate. So you may necessarily need to get the cash flow portion of this. And there are certain properties that will cash flow better than others based off of the characteristics of each one of these properties. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But as you start thinking about identifying a client or identifying a property, you really kind of need to think of this as a bell curve. And you need to look at this client model more like a bell curve. So if you can imagine this, this being set up, this bell curve has really given you some ideas as far as how to look at a cash flow, how to look at appreciation, what is your maintenance risks on these properties, what is your turnover going to be? And then at that point in time, once you understand those pieces, it can help you come to the point where you have a very good grip on your overall risk that you're going to be looking at, so you can calculate and make a decision based off of what you're going to be looking at. And so picking your model and then picking a property to match is essential for your success. So for example, please note, once again, we're not talking about short-term rentals. We're not talking about flipping. We're actually just talking about the standard first-time investor who's going to be buying a property with the idea of renting it out with a 12-month format. At some point in time, if you grow past it, we can certainly go into talking about some of these other methods. When you start talking about this client model, there's the leading third, the middle third, and then the lagging third. So let's start talking about the leading third right here. So this leading third that we're talking about is usually a much lower point of entry. So in most areas, depending on where you're at, that's probably going to be a purchase price of less than $300,000. And this purchase price is going to have a lower point of entry. Your down payment is going to be slightly lower, but you're also going to be experiencing a slightly higher margin when it comes to your rent, because your payments are lower. You're going to be getting more margin between what you're paying on your monthly payment and also what you're collecting. So that's actually going to be a great way to do this. Now, there are some pros and cons to this leading third and this client model. One of the cons is that many times client management can be a little bit more intense. You're usually dealing with people who are probably a little bit less stable when it comes to work. Many are blue collar. Sometimes you're going to have to be dealing with a little bit more maintenance on these houses. Sometimes, depending on how aggressive you want to go, you can go into Section 8. I know many people who like Section 8 because in essence, it's a guaranteed paycheck and they can really get some margin going on this. This is something that you have to decide early on what you're going to be dealing with, but also this client management side. Sometimes these clients are going to be living paycheck to paycheck. So if something were to happen, whether they're unemployed or whether something else has happened in their lives, and they have to make a decision between paying you and eating, more than likely they're going to spend the money on trying to find a way to eat rather than trying to find a way to make the payment to you. Now, the property appreciation, your margin is going to be better when it comes to the actual property itself, you know, the payments that you're going to be receiving. But the property appreciation in many cases with this segment is going to be slightly lower. Turnover could be fairly regular because you're going to be seeing people who are going to be following work. They're going to be a little bit more migratory. And those are some items that you need to keep in mind. Now, strategically speaking, this is not necessarily always a bad segment. For example, many times we deal with this segment in the international community. And undocumented is one of the client groups that works in this. And just keep in mind that this group does not want to create any waves. They really just want to rent and they want to live their life and improve their situation. So many of these people are very good, faithful renters that stay in homes for very long periods of time. They take care of the homes very well. You just kind of have to think through your strategy and understand the segment that you're getting into. But this leading edge tends to be a little bit lower on the lower edge when it comes to that. Now, the second client model that we're dealing with is going to be the client model that is going to be in the middle third. Now, this property type and the point of entry tends to be a little bit higher. You're probably going to be from the 300 to maybe 5 to 600,000, depending on your area where you're going to be buying this. The rate of return on these, as far as the return on investment on cash flow, is usually not necessarily bad, but it's not probably going to be as high as the leading third. The client management in this case, though, is going to be very stable. Work stability is not commonly an issue in this area. And then the property maintenance is not necessarily going to be that frequent. You're going to find that if you have a house that's in very good shape, they're usually going to maintain it at that level. And usually what you're going to find with this is the property balance, the balanced cash flow with reasonable appreciation is pretty common with this. And then tenant turnover is not necessarily as much as you think with this one. If I were to kind of put my personal strategy into this, this is actually the strategy that I employ. I kind of like this middle third because it's a little bit more predictable and it's more on the side of my calculated risk. It doesn't mean I won't necessarily stray into that leading third, but the middle third is really where where I'm at as far as my personal strategy. Now, the last third is where you start getting into the lagging third, or this client model is a little bit more on the upper end, more on the luxury price point, like the $600,000 plus. Now, with this price point, there are some idiosyncrasies to it that you do need to be aware of. The main one with this is that your rate of return is not necessarily always that great. And now your appreciation is, the property appreciation tends to be above average because you're usually buying these in very desirable neighborhoods. You're buying these in neighborhoods that have the schools that everybody wants, usually in the locations close to all the amenities, some of the nicer parts of town. So these tend to have a slightly slower rate of return as far as cash flow, but they tend to be above average when it comes to appreciation. The characteristic of the client tends to be pretty easy too. They tend to be fairly workable. They tend to be very stable when it comes to work. And most of them, sometimes you're going to be dealing with a lot of people who are on short-term assignments. For example, doctors, therapists, pilots, CEOs, different things in that area. Property maintenance is not going to necessarily be an issue, but this segment does not tolerate imperfections very well with a house. And so you are going to be, in essence, working very hard to keep up with the house and the maintenance on that, just so that you can maintain a good property. And for these people. Now, the tenant turnover, this one tends to be moderate to high because they can easily buy a home. And most of the time they tend to get relocated out very quickly. So this is a segment that you can get into, but the entry level at this tends to be fairly high when it comes to this. Now, whether you go into any of these models, you kind of need to identify some of the parts and pieces that are important to you as far as this. So identify the strengths of the property, the weaknesses of the property, and then understand some of the opportunities and possible threats that you might have with your business model. I know this sounds kind of crazy, but there are some very big differences when you're dealing with single family versus multifamily. For example, single family tends to appreciate much quicker and also has moderate cash flow, whereas a multifamily house tends to have much better cash flow, but the appreciation doesn't happen as quickly. Townhomes versus condos, that's another thing. And one thing to keep in mind, especially if you're looking at condos, I have an investor who actually loves condos. But what he's come to find out is that once you get past a certain percentage of homes within a condo association, most of these condos will not let you buy it as an investment as long as they know it. And the reason is because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have a threshold that when you have a maximum amount of investment homes in a condo association, they no longer are fundable, and you have to either use alternative lending or you have to go to all cash, which obviously restricts the condo quite a bit when it comes to buying and selling. So those are big pieces. Now, with the strengths, what you need to do is be able to identify what you want to buy along with the client that you're looking to need, that you're trying that you need to fill this slot. The weakness is how stable and what is their ability to perform when you're getting into this. And then with the opportunities, understanding that there might be some really good business opportunities. For example, I know that in some parts of Richmond area, there are some new data centers that are coming in. There are some new businesses that are moving into place. And if you can identify those places ahead of time, especially in that segment that is the middle third, that middle third would be a very good renting proposition for people who are looking to buy and to move into that or rent, that are looking to move into that business area. Because you're going to start filling in around where that business exists. So opportunities do extend. The threats are sometimes external, like, if you have an accessory dwelling unit that you're planning on renting out or other things like that to turn it into a duplex later, those can be some items that really have have some problems. Now, this little investor criteria worksheet that you're seeing, I actually pulled from the book Hold, which I'm going to come back to here in a couple minutes. And I'm just going to kind of go through the basics with that here in a second. But what we want to talk about next is really the financial model. And in the financial model, there are really four main components to this, with us trying to help people understand how to qualify for the home, also understand how to set up to make the cash flow analysis, and then understand how depreciation and appreciation really do help them. So just starting off, just dealing with a financial model real quickly, you don't necessarily have to have 20% to get into an investment home. You can get by with as little as 15%. Just remember that the more risk the bank is taking in this purchase, the more it's going to cost you. And so if you keep that in perspective, sometimes it makes sense to throw a little extra more money down so that you can increase your down payment and you can increase your cash flow and also do the and also be able to see the appreciation happen. Many of the investors that I've been talking to, they want to pay off their investments in about a 10 to 15 year period. And so putting more money down really does make sense when it comes to building wealth through the real estate model. Now, 15% does work, but the main piece that you need to think about with the 15% down is that the mortgage insurance on anything less than 20% functions very similar to an FHA loan, where the mortgage insurance remains for the life of the loan. So that's obviously a very big and important piece to make sure that we explain to you, so that if you are planning on doing this, you understand that at some point in time you will want to refinance so that you can eliminate that mortgage insurance. And what mortgage insurance is in essence an insurance policy that you're paying to protect the bank in case you can't make your payments. So obviously it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to keep this for a very long time. Now, anything over 20% is not going to have that. Okay, so that's actually a really good thing. 25% really does improve the terms when you start getting into single family. And for multi-unit, that's the base level of entry, which is 25%. Now, as far as acceptable sources of funds in order to be able to make this down payment, savings is a huge place to go. You can always go to your bank and pull cash if you've been sitting on it. And we kind of know that based off of what's been happening in the inflationary market right now, that cash sitting in a bank right now doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, because just this last year alone, we saw about a 7% inflation, which means that $100 is really worth $93 now. And the year before that, we actually saw that we had about 8 to 9% inflation. And so it doesn't make sense, especially when you can buy an appreciating asset that can actually grow with time and that can safeguard your money from that inflation, because you're locking it in once you buy it in. But anyway, you can pull money from cash that you have in savings. Stocks is another place. You can also pull it from a 401k. And this is actually very common. We see a lot of people pulling money from a 401k to do this. Just keep in mind that if you do pull it from a 401k, that because it's not going to be your primary home, there are likely to be some tax consequences associated with this purchase. The final place that we see a lot of people pulling funds from is from a home equity line of credit. So if we have another home that you've been making payments on, that you have a fair amount of equity in, you can take a home equity line of credit against that house, take some money out of it, and use it either for the down payment or to pay the house off. That's actually a very common practice to do that. As far as taking money from a business account, moving that into your personal, that is a little bit difficult. So we usually try to get you to strategize to get that money out of your business before we start this, just to make that happen. Just because what generally happens is if you take it out of the business, we have to do between a 6 and 12 month cash flow analysis to make sure that you're not preventing your business from functioning correctly. And there's a lot of businesses that cannot survive that assessment. So it's really worth your time, that if you do plan on taking money out of your business, that you go ahead and do that well ahead of buying the house. Now, one of the idiosyncrasies with this is that you can't use gifts. You can't get any gifts. So if your wife or your husband has the money in their account, or your dad or your mom are planning on giving you some money towards this, they literally can't give you the money unless they're going to be on the loan with you. So you really have to be able to support the whole thing by yourself. Some other factors that you can use when you're trying to qualify for this, which is very good, is that you can actually use the projected rent on the property to help offset the payment. Now, you can only use 75% of that. And that's because they figure that at some point in time, you are going to have a vacancy. And that's actually not a bad thing to kind of think through it that way, to make sure that you're not really setting yourself up for failure if you do have a prolonged period of time where you don't have a tenant in there. And I'll share a personal story about that here real quick. We bought an investment home in 2021, and the tenant was supposed to move in, I want to say it was the first week of June. And I went over to do the inspection a couple days before that, and there was no issue. And the day of, I get over there to hand the keys over to the tenant, and believe it or not, there was 4 to 6 inches of water in the entire first floor of the house. And so I'm going to tell you that it was absolutely devastating, because I ended up not being able to rent the property. I could have probably forced my way into having this tenant stay with the house, because legally I did have the lease and I did have the terms, but we decided that we weren't going to do that. And so we refunded them the deposit and the first month's money, and proceeded to go through 90 days of restoring the first floor. And what had happened is that the ice maker had ruptured, and it had ruptured between the time I inspected it and the time I went back to give them the keys. And during that time, in essence, there was 4 to 6 inches of water in the entire first floor. We had to cut out all the drywall. We had to cut out all we had to gut the entire first floor about 6 feet up so that we could get the mold out, and we had to get mold remediation in there. It was just a long, big, drawn out problem. It took 90 days to get it done. And so I was actually very thankful that I knew that I had the money to be able to make something like this work long term, because otherwise, I mean, I was going to be hosed if I was so desperate to get somebody in there, because it physically couldn't do it. Physically just couldn't get somebody in there. So it's a good idea to plan for that and to make sure that you have sufficient reserves. And that's actually another piece that's extremely important when it comes to qualifying for a home that is going to be an investment home, is we have to make sure that you have enough reserves just in case you ran into a situation like what I ran into. And those reserves are to make sure that you can make the monthly payments on the house while you're waiting for this house to be restored back to a good enough condition to lease it out. Now, what we can use for those reserves is pretty simple. It can be cash in the bank, it can be stocks, it can be 401k. There's a variety of ways that we can do this. You can probably even take some extra money out of your home equity line to be able to put into your account. As long as it's a secured loan, you can use it. You can't use a signature loan. But so those are some things that you can do. One other thing, the factor that's really important is your credit. Your credit is actually extremely sensitive. Rates and terms are extremely sensitive when you're getting into an investment home. And the reason is because now you're taking a calculated risk to buy an additional property, and they want to make sure that you have the ability to make this work. And so if you have a 700 credit score, I've helped people buy an investment home as low as a 660 credit score, but I'm going to tell you that their interest rate was probably a full percentage point above what would happen if somebody was over a 740. So it's really worth your time, if you're going down the path of trying to get an investment home, to make sure that you set yourself up for success by cleaning everything up on your credit and getting yourself set up. Now, one thing that you can get, you can see that as the last line on this slide, is that you can get a 2% seller concessions. And what that means is that if you're buying let's say a $400,000 house, 2% of that, you can, $400,000, you can get 2%, which is, a fair amount of money, to be able to help you cover the closing costs associated with this house. Now, you can't get any more of that. And so you just have to be careful that you're not asking for too much, because it's not like a traditional home where you can get a significant amount more of that. So $4,000 is still $8,000, and that really does help when it comes to helping with the closing costs. Now, here's a real quick hack I'm going to share with you that you really need to know about, especially if your plan is to buy more than one investment home. It's easier to buy multiple investment properties in the first year, because when you do that, we use whatever is on your lease minus 25% to help you get qualified. Okay. Now, the reason why that's important is because we're using that as the qualified income, whereas after the first tax year, we have to use the net on your tax returns. And that's a pretty important difference right there, because usually we have a fair amount of write-offs, especially if like I did, you had $40,000 worth of damages to the first floor of your house because the first floor got flooded because of an ice maker, wonderful ice maker. All right, so going into the next one right here. So this is the basics of how to get qualified, but then how do you find the cash flow? How do you figure out what the rental is going to support? So there's a fair amount of ways that you can do this, both paid and unpaid. Bigger Pockets at the bottom, Rentometer, they usually give you a free first time on it, but if you're a serious investor and you're really looking to see and run the analysis on there, you're going to need something, either the paid version of Bigger Pockets or Rentometer, or you're going to have to kind of do what I did, which is go in and then just do kind of like a market survey based off of Zillow and Realtor.com. Because if they do, Realtor and Zillow.com do in essence have places where you can see the purchases and what is sold and what's for sale and things like that. But they also have a rental button. And that rental button can actually give you homes that are being rented nearby within the range of what you're looking to accomplish. And so this is actually making sure that you understand how much your home can rent for and what the market does bear is going to be an integral part to making sure that you're setting yourself up for success. And the reason why I say that is because, cash flow in this case, you obviously have to make your monthly payments, but understanding whether this home is going to provide you with at least enough to be able to overcome it is pretty important, because if there's a saturation point of too many rentals in that area, you may need to be looking at a different area, even though this looks like a very, very, very good possibility for you. So saturation point is actually a pretty important piece to be looking at. Understanding your business model and what you're really looking for, whether it's appreciation or cash flow, because if there's too many rentals that are available, you may not have the availability to be able to pull in the extra cash that you were thinking that you might be able to pull in. And just making sure that it meets the calculated risk that you're trying to set up. And so what we want to do is, once you've identified what that rent is we want to start plugging in some of these numbers. Now, I'm going to go back to this financial model piece with Hold. So the two spreadsheets that you've seen actually come from this book, which is called Hold. I bought mine. I bought it for $6 on Amazon, all used and marked up. And I just kind of went in and used it. It's a really good way to do it. And you can kind of see the worksheet over here and how to do this. Now, what I did is I took this to a nerd level. And so I'm going to show you nerd level here real quick. This is nerd level. Okay, so here's nerd level Chris Parks. And what I did is I transformed nerd level Chris Parks into an Excel sheet. And pretty much you plug the numbers in at the top and it spits the numbers out at the bottom, which is actually pretty, once you've gotten it set up, it's actually pretty good. This one right here, I'm just going to walk you through it real quick. It's a little hard to see on the previous slide. This slide right here doesn't really give you a whole lot of detail on it, but I'm going to walk you through the detail on this spreadsheet. It's actually pretty cool. Right up here, you can actually see that I made this for a very specific person because he was considering a duplex. I'm not going to tell you where it is because I think it's still on the market. And I think he's actually negotiating on it right now. But it was listed at $325. So if you really want to do forensics, you can look throughout the entire area and figure that out pretty quickly because there's only so many duplexes. Now, he was coming in at a purchase price and with a maximum down payment, he was going to put 25% down because this was going to be his multi-unit. So his down payment was going to end up being $80,000, and his closing costs, these are just the legal fees right here, and then these are the escrows, and then this was the amount of loan that he was financing. Now, he was hoping that he was going to get $6,500 from the seller in order to be able to cover some interest points on this. Now, whether he did or not, we ran it without that, and so you can see the interest points right here, $6,500 included in his cost. Now, based off of the situation that you're looking at with right here, you can see pretty quickly that his monthly payment, including escrows and prepaids and all that stuff, is coming out to $2,099, which annually is $25,188 with the entire taxes, insurance, everything included, to $25,000 for the year. Now, this is his payment. Now we come down, he has 2 units, unit A and unit B. So he's currently, they're being rented out for $1,400 a piece, which means you're getting $16,800 each one. And that the total is $33,600. Now, there weren't any miscellaneous expenses in there, and he did not anticipate any repairs. You can see I have the line item for the repairs in there. This one down here is actually for later on to help you manage the property. So that's why it's all blank. But this is just to help you understand whether you have cash flow or not. So there were no repairs that he had to make. You can see that his net rental income was superior to what he was going to be paying. And if you scroll down a little bit, you can see down here the net operating income, or the NOI. His net operating income was $2,800. Okay, his mortgage payment expenses $2,099, and his cash flow on a monthly basis was $701 per month. Now, that's annually, meaning that he is taking home, after his expenses on this very specific property, he is taking home $8,400 to help him with, putting his kids through school, supplementing his, his retirement, whatever it is that he wants to do with that $8,400. Some of it eventually will end up being in maintenance and other items like that. But for the most part, he was going to get $8,400 as far as return. So if you come down and you take this number, which is $8,400, you can see the $8,400 also right here in this orange slip right here, and you divide it by his total cost, which is the $97,604. You can see that he has an 8.62% rate of return, which right there in the red, you can see the 8.62. So that's a pretty decent return on investment. What that means to you is that if you were comparing this to a stock, let's say Google would be providing you on a monthly basis with a dividend of 8%. That's not too shabby. Just to let you know, most stocks right now are functioning in the 1% to 2% range. So this right here is a rock star investment just based on cash reflow. Now, you can also notice that I've got 3 different items right here that are set up in kind of like this little orange color. I've got the annual appreciation rate of 4.4%, which over the last 20 years, we've seen roughly that. Some years have been significantly more, some years have been significantly less. But overall, we've seen a 4.4% consistent rate of return after over 20 years. So that means that if we can foresee that coming forward into the upcoming years, that in essence, we're going to see another $14,300 being added to the value of this home by the end of the next calendar year. And so if you add the total rate of return right here, 8412, plus the 14,300, and you take a look at this down here, the depreciation for the first year. Now, the depreciation for the first year, what in essence you're seeing right here is what the taxable advantage is for you when you go to file your taxes. Now, every home is slightly different. This is just kind of an average number. My home that I bought is a little bit over this purchase price, and this was the depreciation I took last year. So in essence, I'm actually coming in fairly close to where I think this is going to come in. And so if I add all these 3 numbers together, and then I divide it by the total cash for down payment, closing cost, and repairs, that, now keep in mind, that includes the points that we use to buy down the rate. Now we're at a 35.05% rate of return. Now, that's not entirely cash flow, but that is the cumulative effect of everything you're seeing here. So in essence, when you're looking at these different pieces together, the cash flow, the depreciation, and the appreciation, this investment is a rock star investment for whoever ends up buying it, whether my client right here, who is, I think, working towards this, or if another client were to go ahead and buy this. So this is actually, this worksheet works very good because all I have to do when I set this up, it's a little harder when you're dealing with the paper worksheet like you see over here, because you have to do it all manually. But over here, you have to you just put a couple numbers in and it spits out exactly what you're dealing with at the bottom. Now, here's the great thing about this too, because it's not just the appreciation of the home that's going up, like you see right here. Rent in the area, actually nationally, has gone up in the last 20 years, approximately 3.1% annually, which theoretically speaking, if you wanted to hammer down on your tenant, you could raise your rent from $1,400 to $1,443.40 the following year, and you would be well within your market average to be able to do so. And so with the first time rental capacity that you're looking at here, this is actually a very good tool to help you succeed in knowing whether the investment is actually worthy of your time or not worthy of your time. And really all it takes is identifying the property, understanding what it is. Now, there's still more to it that you have to do behind the scenes. You're going to have to check into like if you're dealing with a condo or if you're dealing with some other property like that, you have to check and see if there are any threats to you being able to use that. Any eminent domain, anything like that that may cause problems down the road. These are all important pieces to know. Now, some of you I know are not numbers people, and you're like, what the heck? Can't you just tell me yes or no on this? The answer is I probably could, and I could probably help you figure that out. But if you're going to be an investor, you really need to start being good with numbers, or at least learn to understand how to read them so that you can apply this to your situation and make sure that you're not setting yourself for disaster. Because where you win is going in. And what I mean by that is how you buy it and what that appreciation rate is expected to be over the period of time, and your return on investment down here in the red in the bottom right-hand corner. This stuff right here is really telling you short-term, long-term, what it is that you can expect with this property, and if it's actually going to convert into something that really makes sense short-term and long-term. So remember, you win as you're going in. All right, so going into the next one. So how do you manage your rental? So this is the next question. And really, quite frankly, this is the area of panic that a lot of first-time investors have. And I see quite a few people here that I see that have been past clients that have talked to me in the past about investing. And so this is actually pretty important, because I'm going to tell you that I freaked out when I started going down the path of deciding how to manage my rental. You have to kind of make a decision. I know early on, I decided that I was actually going to get a professional manager to manage all of my rentals for me. I need to let you know that I have rescinded that, and I am actually managing it myself. And I'll kind of tell you the reason why. I went back and did the study on it. And what I found with it is that if you do the vetting correctly at the front, it's a whole lot easier on the backside. Now, once again, I'm in that middle third as far as the client group that I'm trying to get a hold of and the client group that I'm trying to stay in front of. So I chose my property to go with that middle third. And I also chose the people based off of what I'm about to show you, how to manage this right here. Now, I'm going to tell you that I was fortunate that my realtor actually came and showed me how to do this, because I had no clue what I was doing when I first bought my first investment home. In fact, I was so freaked out. I literally didn't know what I thought I was going to lose it to somebody who was going to squat in my house forever, and I was going to have to be making payments forever. This right here actually made a huge difference between me managing it and choosing somebody else to manage it for me. So here are some of the things that have to be handled, whether you use a professional manager or you manage it yourself. You're going to have to, deal with contracts. You're going to have to deal with collections. You're going to have to deal with maintenance. You're going to have to deal with tenants. You're going to have to deal with turnovers and inspections. Make sure that you have a network of vendors who can paint, fix, whatever it is that you want to do. You can notice that all of those are the same over here. The only difference is that this one is going to charge you between 8 to 10% monthly, and this one you kind of pay yourself. Okay, so in the end, you have to kind of decide which one makes the most sense for you based off of not just this, because the fear may be so real and you're like, I would just give everything away, and I'm just such a softie that if they told me they couldn't make the payment, I just wouldn't do anything. Okay, well, in that case, it's worth wasting, or not wasting, it's worth investing that 8 to 10% so that at least you have a return on investment. But here's what you need to know is that by paying this 8 to 10% that we're talking about that you see right here, in essence, that reduces, based off of the same exact house that we looked at, the previous numbers, it reduces it from an 8.5% return on investment to a 5.5% return on investment. But if it gives you peace of mind, 5.5 is still better than the stock market right now. And appreciation is still going up on that house. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad strategy. You just have to decide which strategy makes the most sense to you. Because if it is truly overwhelming and you truly feel like you don't have the opportunity to do this, then and do it correctly, then hiring somebody to do it to manage it professionally is probably not a bad idea. Now, having said that, there are some tools available. And here are some tools available for those who want to professionally manage, and then also for those who want to self-manage. If you decide to professionally manage, most real estate agents, either in their office or maybe not in their office, or their office is really tiny, but most real estate agents in their office, they do have a section that manages real estate. Now, they can be the ones that manage all the pieces that run the private, if that's what you want to do. There are also online entities that will do it, that in essence, they do it from afar. Those tend to be a little bit more affordable than the other ones. And then there's local management companies. That's really all they do. All they do is just manage these properties for you. But in essence, you're still going to be expecting, if you professionally get it managed, that it's going to cost you between 8 and 10% monthly. Now, they take it right out of the rent, because the rent goes to them first, and then you get it after it's all said and done. So it's not necessarily hurting you anything. It's mailbox money, whether you're professionally managing it or they're managing it for you. Now, if you get into the self-managed, these are some ones that some of my clients have used in the past. Hemlane, Turbo Tenant, Buildium, Tenant Turner. These are actually not bad ones. They are paid for versions. I personally don't use these. I actually have a very different set that I end up using, because they were referred to me by my realtor, and I have found them to be very, very, very useful. Zillow actually has a Zillow Rental Manager website. And when I go into the Zillow Rental Manager over here, I can actually list up to 10 properties for free. And the great thing about the Zillow thing is everybody's familiar with Zillow. A lot of people go to Zillow to look for rentals. The great thing about this Zillow piece that you have there when it comes to rentals is that you can load as many photographs on there as you want. You can put anything in there as far as characteristics that you want. And when the client applies through Zillow, what ends up happening is that Zillow actually sends you an email. They've already done the credit report. They've already done the job history. They've already telling you how much money these people make. A lot of it's self-reported. But in essence, when they apply to your property, they pay a one-time fee for your credit report. In that credit report, they can send it to 20, 30 different rentals if that's what they want to do. And in this case, when they sent it to me, like when I did my rental after the Great Flood of 2001, after the Great Flood of 2001, and I put it back on the market, I had 35 applicants come and try to rent from me, and I was able to do the pick of the litter. I looked at the credit scores, I knew exactly what I was getting into, and I chose appropriately based off of that. Now, based off of the realtor who sold me the house, what he told me is use Zillow Rental Manager to help you vet the client and to get them in the door, but then transfer over to apartments.com to do all of your collection systems. And so I did that, and I actually found that he was quite right. The Zillow Rental Manager is not bad, but it doesn't have the same functions as apartments.com. And apartments.com does have the same philosophy, where if you have less than 10 rentals, it doesn't cost you anything. And so, quite frankly, I manage my rentals through there. It's a beautiful way. I can actually correspond with them. They can correspond with me. Everything's legally tracked right in there. I can track all the bills for the year. I can track all the receipts for the year. I can add additional ones. And then what I can also do through it is that I can add any kind of item on there that if I want them to pay me by the 1st and they don't pay me by the 1st, it automatically assesses. If I don't have the check in my account or on apartments.com by the 1st, in essence, it automatically sends them a $250 late bill. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to log in. I don't have to do anything. Now, you can also use Zillow Rental Manager or apartments.com's contract if you want to. I personally don't. I have another one that I use that is very effective. but they literally have a lot of the tools on there. Now, if you start using some of the other tools other than just listing and then collecting and doing whatever like that, there is a cost for the contract. There is a cost. You can secure a legal counsel through there too. There's cost for different pieces like that. But if you just use it the way I'm using it, it's actually no cost to you. So the point of sale aspect that apartments.com works very well. The listing side for Zillow, I think that's where they shine. And apartments.com really has everything else. The point of sale, they can do the late fees, they can do the adding of bills, client communications, and really at year end, the reconciling of the books is super easy when it comes to that. So anyway, that takes us into our final little piece. And this, I don't think I need to really deal a ton on this aspect right here, but I do want to at least hit on it very quickly before we go into the question and answer piece. And that is the benefits of investing in real estate. We've seen the last 3 years, we have seen inflation just eat up our savings accounts and eat up our buying power. It's made it very difficult if you have money in any kind of a CD, or if you have money sitting around and anything like that. It really has taken a lot of that cash out of you. And it's worth understanding that while real estate may not necessarily be a quick liquid investment, it certainly is a very good addition to your portfolio. And certainly in times where inflation is going crazy like it is right now, like you see there in number 4, it can be a great hedge against inflation. It can also be a great way to gain appreciation and for you to have not only extra income, but tax incentives. And like, here's the great thing about the home that I'm renting out, is that I don't necessarily depend on that money. I've got a full-time job. I don't depend on that money to survive. But if I needed to, I have built over the last couple of years that I've been renting this out, I've built up a pretty nice kitty in there of money that I could take out and I could use, or I can do improvements to the house, or I can, in essence, use it for a vacation. I use it for whatever I want, or I can use it to pay it down so that when I do hit retirement, now that home is cash flow positive 100%, and I can just live off the dividends the rest of my life. And so this is a pretty good way for you to do this, to set yourself up for long-term success. And I would highly encourage you that maybe if you have considered, or if you haven't considered, this is a great way to get into the real estate market. If you're on this call, and I know there's a few realtors on this call as well, this is a great way to talk to your clients as well. And if you would like to share some of this information, I'd be more than happy to share it with you, to be able to set you up for success so that you can have the same conversation with your clients. So that's something that's worth that. And this kind of plays into pretty much my last slide right here, which is how I work. You know, I'm very different than a lot of my clients, a lot of my counterparts. A lot of my counterparts, they spend most of their time trying to find the next lead. They're doing cold calls, they're buying leads, they're paying for partnerships. I choose to do my business very different. I choose to work exclusively by referral, so that I can devote myself before, during, and after each transaction to my clients' needs. And this is a beautiful example of exactly why I do it this way, because I don't believe any of my counterparts have put together a first-time investor class that can actually help people get to the next level. And so the only thing I ask is, as I devote myself to you, and I avoid doing the cold calls, and I avoid buying leads, and I devote myself to you before, during, and after, all I ask is that you refer me somebody comparable to yourself. That's all I ask. Somebody comparable to yourself that may be looking to buy, build, or refinance a home. And so that's just my simple strategy to earn your trust, to earn your business, and to work extremely hard for you as I help you build your wealth. And that's how I work. I work by referral. So I would love the opportunity to work with you, with your friends and your family, if you're so willing to share my name and refer them to me. And so that really leads us to this last one, and I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Of course, if you would like to talk, if you would like to, in essence, talk in a little bit more depth about your specific situation, please message me. Please send me something so that I can get it set up and I can get you set up for success, whether it's a phone call or we can do a video call or whatever it is that might help you set up a strategy for you to earn, number one, to earn your business, but number two, also to get you set up for your first investment home. So I've unmuted everybody. If you do have a question, certainly by all means, just unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, for those of you who are on a tight timeline, I finished 8 minutes ahead of time, and you're free to go. So thank you so much. So Myra, you're asking about a HELOC. I personally don't have HELOCs, but I can put you in touch with somebody who does. So we can circle back on that one, if that's okay with you. Okay, Myra?
Well, that's thinking on the future, but to my understanding was HELOCs are only for primary homes. Is that
For the most part, yeah, HELOCs are for primary homes, and they now there are some that will do it on investment homes, but for the vast majority, it is going to be a primary home, and they'll let you take out, depending on the entity, they'll let you take out up to about 95% of your equity, so that you can use it towards towards whatever it is that you want to do, which hopefully it's investing in another piece of property. Does that help?
yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Any others? All right, we have a real experienced group or a real shy group, so either one. I'm just thankful that you came out tonight, and anything I can do to help you be successful, please let me know. Going once, going twice. All right, I love every single one of you. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great evening.